Your Excellency Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Minister of State for External Affairs of the Government of India, the Honorable Dr. Rashid Bibi John, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Renewable Energy and Public Utilities, Honorable Ministers, Members of Parliament, Excellencies, Sir Ramesh Jiwlal, the Chancellor of the University of Mauritius, Professor Jagisar, the Pro-Chancellor and Chairman of the University of Mauritius, distinguished guests, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen and students, good afternoon. Namaskaram. A very warm welcome to you all at the Poloctavia Auditorium this afternoon. Today is very exceptional as we have an exceptional guest, His Excellency Dr. Shashi Tharoor. So I have now the privilege and honor of inviting His Excellency Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Minister of State for External Affairs of the Government of India, for his address on the theme India-Africa Partners in Development.
Thank you, Amrita. Good afternoon. Your Excellency, Dr. Ahmed Rashid Bibi John, Deputy Prime Minister of Mauritius. Your Excellency, Dr. the Honorable Vasant Kumar Bamwari, Minister of Education, Culture and Human Resources of the Republic of Mauritius, Honorable Ministers and members of the National Assembly, Sir Ramesh Jiwlal, Chancellor of the University of Mauritius, Professor Sudarshan Jageshwar, Pro-Chancellor and Chairman of the Council of the University of Mauritius, the High Commissioner of India, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends. I hope that covers everyone. C'est vraiment un plaisir d'être ici parmi vous. Mes salutations à vous tous, mais je vais parler en anglais quand même. I am greatly honored to be asked to address you all at this historic building of the University of Mauritius. It's indeed a pleasure to address an audience such as this on a subject which is so close to my heart and which forms a central plank of the foreign policy of the Government of India. The buildings of the University of Mauritius are steeped in history and are as old as this place itself. In fact, as we came in, Professor Jageshwar pointed out to me the first building, the old agriculture department, gorgeous old building in this campus. And it's also significant that some of the Indian universities and the University of Mauritius have been linked through the bonds of academia, and more importantly, have worked together to provide a platform towards addressing issues of common concern and to providing guidance and direction to the future leaders of the 21st century. I consider it a particular honor to be with you at a place where one of the highly respected presidents of India, Professor APJ Abdul Kalam, had stood to address all of you when he had an interactive session at this university a little over 3.5 years ago in March 2006 during his state visit to Mauritius. I've been in Mauritius now for just under 2 days. The purpose of my visit was to participate in the Apravasi Divas, a historic date which is steeped in poignant memory. The Apravasi Ghat has a moving tale cast in each of its bricks and stones, in each of those 16 steps that I had the privilege of walking. History is unforgiving if we do not remember those forefathers of ours who sacrificed all to bequeath to us what we enjoy today. We should never forget their labor and toil, lest we disconnect ourselves from something which should be cherished and recalled for the larger good of all of us, indeed, of all mankind. I congratulate Mauritius, its government and its people for retelling the world the memory of a set of people who converted what would have been a very difficult environment for them, a hostile environment, into what today is a heavenly paradise. And I have no fear of exaggeration because though I've only seen your country for 2 days, I have seen it bathed in gorgeous sunshine. I have seen it the length and breadth and east and west and north driving. And a little earlier this morning, I saw it from the air in a helicopter with your Prime Minister. And I have to tell you, you do live in paradise. It is so beautiful. I'm charmed by Mauritius' beauty, delighted by the warmth of its people, and touched by the generosity and hospitality of my hosts. It really has been, as your slogan would have it, Un vrai plaisir to be here. Now, this meeting with you all is almost my last official engagement, give or take an encounter with the press and a couple of small meetings during my very brief stay in this wonderful country. And the subject of the address is particularly appropriate. The India-Africa partnership has deep roots in history. Linked across the Indian Ocean, we have been neighbors and partners for thousands of years. There was regular interaction between communities and traders, especially from the west coast of India, Gujarat, parts of South India, going all the way down to my home state of Kerala, with Abyssinia, with Somalia, with Mombasa, Zanzibar, and even Mozambique. These communities and groups played significant roles in the histories of both India and Africa. The advent of the Europeans and the colonial period disturbed those interactions but could not disrupt them. Later, both India and Africa shared the pain of subjugation and the joys of freedom and liberation. We worked shoulder to shoulder in the fight against apartheid and racial discrimination. Satyagraha, nonviolence, and active opposition to injustice and discrimination were first used by Mahatma Gandhi on the continent of Africa. Mahatma Gandhi always believed that so long as Africa was not free, India's own freedom would be incomplete. Our first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, was also a firm believer and practitioner of the principle of Afro-Asian solidarity and of support to the struggles of the people of Africa against discrimination and apartheid. He convened the first African-Asian Conference when many of the countries of Africa were not yet free. And he continued to work, as has every Indian Prime Minister since, for that ideal. So after India achieved independence, we embarked on a path of close cooperation with the newly independent nations of Africa, who shared similar problems of underdevelopment, poverty, and disease. India's cooperation with Africa was based on the principle of South-South cooperation, on similarities of circumstances and experiences. India was always open to sharing our strengths, our democratic model of development, and our appropriate technologies that are cheap but pretty effective. Africa became the largest partner of India's technical assistance and capacity building programs. Many of you present here today, and I speak of the older generation, not today's students, but many of the elders here would have studied in some Indian university. We are proud that tens of thousands of African students studied in various Indian universities and then returned home to contribute to the economic and social development of their respective countries. Some of them rose to hold high positions. It's always a pleasure for us visiting from India to come across African leaders, as we have done in Mauritius, who reminisce about their days at Delhi University, for example. My colleagues and I each had classmates during our time at Delhi University who were from Mauritius. And that applies to many other African countries too. In the first few decades of our independence, and also of those of our African partners, India, at a time when I will be frank and say we did not have much to share, but India still extended over $3 billion worth of concessional lines of credit to be used in those infrastructure and other development projects that were determined by our African partners. There was also a continuously high level of interaction between the political leaderships of India and African nations. Indian leaders such as Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Srimati Indira Gandhi, indeed Sri Rajiv Gandhi and other leaders have traveled to Africa. I think they've all four of them, come to your country as well, and they're held in high esteem in Africa. So also were the leaders of Africa, who always received a warm welcome in India, and this continues even today. These cooperation programs and the guidance of our respective leaderships laid the foundation of a very strong political and economic partnership between India and Africa in the 20th century. On these foundations, a new architecture for structured engagement and cooperation for the 21st century was designed at the first India-Africa Forum Summit hosted by India in New Delhi in April 2008. The summit provided an occasion for the leaderships of India and Africa to come together to chart out the roadmap for a systematic engagement. The India-Africa Forum Summit adopted two historic documents, the Delhi Declaration and the India-Africa Framework for Cooperation. The Delhi Declaration, which is a political document, covers bilateral, regional, and international issues. These include our common positions on UN reforms, on climate change, World Trade Organization, international terrorism, and so on. I plan not to go into too much detail on these now because I'd like to have more time for a question and answer interchange with you, and I'll be happy to spell out anything that I've either mentioned or not mentioned that you'd like to talk about, so we can have a true interaction. The India-Africa Framework for Cooperation spells out the agreed areas of cooperation. These areas span human resources, institutional capacity building, education, of course, science and technology, agricultural productivity and food security, which is so important to Africa and to India, industrial growth, small and medium enterprises and minerals, health sector, the development of infrastructure, and of course, in today's 21st century world, information and communications technology, ICT. Our Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, also announced at the summit a duty-free tariff preferential scheme for the 49 least developed countries, 34 of whom are in Africa. This will cover 94% of India's total tariff lines. And more important, it will provide preferential market access on tariff lines for 92.5% of the global exports of all LDCs. We hope that by providing increased access to African products to Indian markets, the duty-free tariff preferential scheme will increase trade flows between India and Africa. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh also announced our decision to double the amount for our lines of credit to $5.4 billion for the next 5 years. In other words, India is willing to spend $1 billion each year on Africa. These lines of credit will be for projects prioritized by African nations, and they could include such crucial sectors as infrastructure, including agriculture and food security again, IT once more, telecoms, power generation, physical connectivity, and of course small, medium and micro enterprises which can be so useful in Africa, water management issues, building capacity in agriculture, and in institutions dedicated to agricultural research. At the India-Africa Forum Summit, India also announced a grant of $500 million for the next 5 to 6 years to undertake projects in human resource development and capacity building. Long-term scholarships for undergraduates, postgraduates, and higher courses have been doubled, and the number of slots under our Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, ITEC, has increased from 1,100 to 1,600 every year. We've also offered to share with our African friends our experience in using remote sensing and satellite imagery for weather forecasting, natural resources management, land use, and land cover mapping, and a variety of other applications.